One, friend of Charlie Kirk. Eric Trump. Two, the future of Western civilization if one side of the political aisle is ready to take up arms. Call for violence. Direct incitements to violence are not protected by the First Amendment. But quote-unquote hate speech? What are you doing, Attorney General Pam Bondi? With Michael Malice. 3, Destiny, one time here on Will Kane Country. TikTokers and Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois take this to new lows. You got to hear the sound from the left. It is Will Kane Country, streaming live at the Will Kane Country YouTube channel, the Fox News Facebook page, terrestrial radio across this great United States of America, but always available by subscribing at Apple or on Spotify, as has been the case throughout our existence. And notably over the last 2 weeks, this is a place of community, a place for you, a place for me, a place for us. We want you to bookmark, like, subscribe to the Will Kane Country YouTube channel, and we also want you to jump into the comments section. We want to make you a member of the Willisha. Coming up a little bit later on in this show, and I can't explain why. Maybe it's my algorithm. Maybe it's my emotion. But I keep getting fed and I keep internalizing sound from people across comedic stages, political platforms, and across the internet. People like comedian Michelle Wolf, people like Governor J.B. Pritzker, or even just random people that make me wonder about the future of humanity, like this TikToker who wasn't satisfied simply with the death of Charlie Kirk.
To be honest, I don't really care if anybody who is a slice, the primitive, gets sniped. I hope all of them get sniped. I hope more of them get sniped. I hope they come and burn their homes down to the ground. Like, honestly, it could have been worse. It should have been worse. Why not just wipe out the whole bloodline? Wipe it out. Remove them from play. Because people are really, like, upset that we don't feel empathy. I'm following in his footsteps. He told us not to feel empathy and that it wasn't wrong and all this, and that, and this, that, and third. I agree with him. I don't have empathy. He's right. Empathy makes you, and I definitely do not have empathy for my political enemies and people who go against my human rights. It's that simple. You wanted to play stupid games. You won the stupid prize. Eternal nap. Good luck.
Why not wipe out their entire bloodline? The limits of free speech in the United States, as defined by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, exist at the line of a direct incitement to violence. Are you calling people to commit imminent and specific violence? That line is being pushed. That line is being tested by everyday common fringe lunatics like the one you just heard on TikTok, or people that were once a guest here on Will Kane Country. We'll play that sound a little bit later for you when it comes to YouTube streamer Destiny. But as abhorrent as it is, and it is abhorrent to hear and to see the celebration of, for example, college students at Texas State, these people should pay the social price for revealing the ugliness of their soul and their character. And these people should be fired, expelled, banished from polite society in America. But these people should not be pursued by the United States government. Attorney General Pam Bondi over the last 24 hours has suggested the government will go after, quote-unquote, hate speech. Hate speech is the province of Canada. Hate speech is the province of the UK. Hate speech is the antithesis of the life's work of Charlie Kirk. We do not have hate speech in the United States. We're going to walk up and down and across that line. We're going to play the clips. We're going to break it down for you, not simply to make your blood boil, but to explore the limits and the actions perhaps soon to come here when it comes to accountability in the United States. I'll be excited because coming up a little bit later as well, we're going to have a sit-down conversation with intellect. Michael Malice. I always have deep conversations with Malice about the future of not just the United States, but Western civilization. That existential debate, that soul searching, is what's taking place over the last 2 weeks. It's not just the murder of Charlie Kirk, but in some ways it feels like we have to figure out whether or not this is the assassination of the experiment that is the United States. How can we move forward if some significant percentage of the country feels like violence is legitimate reaction to disagreement? Looking forward to having that conversation with Michael Malice. But let's get into it now with story number 1. Eric Trump is the co-founder and chief strategy officer of American Bitcoin, and Asher Ganoot is the executive chairman and board member of American Bitcoin, which today celebrates its launch on the NASDAQ. And I'm excited for Eric, and I'm excited to have him here today as well. Eric, we're going to get into Bitcoin because I'm going to tell you I am going to start from a place of great ignorance. But I'm going to start today with a place of a little more familiarity. And I would love if you would indulge me to just explore your relationship with Charlie Kirk and what you've been feeling and going through over the past week.
Well, Charlie was a great friend. I think you know this. He was a friend of our entire family. He was a great friend of Don's. He was a friend of mine. He was a great friend of my father's. And Charlie walked into the very office I'm in right now about 10 years ago. And he told me, and I mentioned this on Fox and Friends this morning. He mentioned this whole story where he wanted to literally change the hearts and minds of the youth across this nation, right? And people come into this place all the time with kind of, nonsense ideas and you kind of roll your eyes and you say, yes, that's wonderful. And very few can actually execute on that vision. And Charlie built everything that he said he was going to build, 10 years ago. At that point, he had 2 or 3 chapters. They were small. And he goes, Eric, I want to take over the student bodies of every single chapter across the nation. I want to insert great conservatives into collegiate leadership. I want to create great organizations. I want to get out the vote. I really want to, stop the indoctrinations and the revisionist history and, the nonsense that we see all over the place. And Will, the guy did it. I mean, he freaking did it. And it's why they decided to sit on a roof at 200 yards away with a rifle, and take his life. They can't stand people like Charlie. They can't stand people like you. They can't stand people like me, people who have loud voices and who have never been afraid to get on that stage, and make our voices heard. And, Will, you've watched the entire fight, probably closer than anyone, right? At your time at Fox and everywhere else. And I mean, if we didn't have the voice that we had, if I didn't have the loud voice, if my father didn't have the loud voice, if I wasn't willing to go to every single swing state in the country and do 10 rallies a day in crowds of people, just like the one you saw Charlie was in, we would not have won. We would have gone steamrolled. Hillary raised 5 times the amount of money. We the vast majority of the first campaign was self-funded, right? She raised $1.5 billion. It's that we had the backbone and the guts, and the fortitude to stand on that stage and be a little bit politically incorrect and speak to the people and speak to the masses that my father was able to win and take back over this country. And man, what Charlie did by doing that, by creating the greatest youth movement of all time, I mean, he changed the entire, he changed a generation. And by the way, if these people think that shooting somebody in the neck, is going to somehow delete everything that this guy stood for, everything that we stood for, everything. All it does is concrete his very ideology into every single one of those people who, by the way, Will, are going to be voting for the next 50 years in this nation, hopefully, longer. And so I think this is the greatest kind of, law of unintended consequences. I think the damage that they've done to their party over and over and over, whether it was a Russia hoax or trying to kill my father multiple times, including Butler and then in, Florida, people are understanding the radical left for exactly who these people are. No different than the comedian. She didn't sound like much of a comedian, but whoever the hell that, quote unquote social influencer was that you played at the lead into this whole story. And I can tell you, here's the positive news. Let me just end with this. For as much nonsense as we all see on social media, 99.9% of people in this country are disgusted by the events that happened a week ago. Somebody's going to say something outlandish because they always do, using free speech from from their mom's basement. But honestly, this country is in harmony. This country mourns the loss of a great American, and short of being just a person of absolute insanity and craziness, no one mourns death in this country. And I can't tell you how many people this has pushed to the right, to God, the country, to the Constitution, to the American flag, to everything that we love as Americans.
I hope you're right, Eric. I do wonder today, and I do question my own conviction of where the 99 percentile of America is. I don't want to over-index the crazy fringe and the stories on TikTok. And I hope you're right. I hope it is that America is still a good place, and regardless of our disagreements, whether or not you're left or you're right, you can quite honestly decline to celebrate assassination. You know, it strikes me, Eric, as you're talking, thinking about the two different attempts on your father's life. You, your brother, your family, the rest of your siblings, you have been surrounded by threat. And Charlie, make no mistake, was part of your circle. We all know how close Charlie was to your family, how much work he did, you know, behind the scenes to reelect the president. You and your family, Eric, have been surrounded by threat. And it makes me wonder two things, like, how does that feel? And how do you retain such an optimism about the vast majority of America when it touches you individually, Eric, so frequently and so close?
Yeah. So, Will, I wrote a book, and it's called Under Siege. And I wrote that title, 2.5 years ago when I started it. And, first they tried Russia. Then they tried to impeach my father the first time. Then they tried to impeach him the second time. Then they went after Kavanaugh. You covered that very well on Fox. And they raided our home. They debanked us. I got 112 subpoenas, likely the most subpoenaed person in American history. They weaponized every DA against us. They weaponized every AG against us. They filed 91 criminal counts against my father for doing absolutely nothing wrong. They tried to bankrupt our company. They tried to take the name off of every single building, including Trump Tower, the building that I'm sitting in right now. They took my father off of the ballot in Colorado. Then they took him off the ballot in Maine. Right? I mean, they took his free speech away. Every judge gagged him all across the nation. Then they posted his mugshot all over the place. Then they took him off of Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. They turned down my dials. They tried to take away our free speech. And I was on Sean Hannity one night, and I said, Sean, they've tried to do everything, right? And that's what I write about in the book, the siege that they put on our family. I wouldn't be surprised, Sean, if they tried to kill him. And by the way, I got hit. I got hit by the left. How dare you say that? How dare you say that? And I go, no. Like, honestly, these people have tried to do everything they could to take us out of the game, right? Again, bankrupt, delete, destroy, smear, laugh at, make fun of. I mean, all the way back to, Obama at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. You probably remember that. I'm not sure if somebody with Donald Trump's intellect and accomplishments could make a president. Like, give me a break, coming from a community organizer, like, give me a freaking break. And I said, I wouldn't be surprised if they resorted to physical violence. And, I had my two kids on my lap, and Laura was sitting right next to me. I know you know Laura very well. And, one of your colleagues over there. And that's when I hear the gunshots start going off. And, and then sure enough, 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, once again, it happened at the golf course. And then, the other day, our dear friend's Charlie's life was expunged when somebody shoots him in the neck, with a high caliber rifle while calling him a fascist. It's kind of interesting that the guy dressed in all black standing on a roof 200 yards away with a German rifle, a Mauser, shooting over a crowd of innocent people who are, who love being there, love celebrating American greatness and our Constitution, and love God and love family and love American virtue. Yet Charlie somehow the fascist, coming from a guy on a roof dressed in black with a rifle. I mean, I can't make much sense of it, but that is the entire point of Under Siege and what I started writing. And I published this book literally 2 days before Charlie died. And you better believe he would have been the final chapter in this siege, because that's what it was. A siege meant to surround us, to take us out, to bankrupt us, to silence us, to make us irrelevant, to make sure we can never stand on the political stage again. And that's what these animals want to do. And Will, in this country, the bullets are only flying one way. And I'm sick and tired of hearing it the opposite. Well, there's violence on both sides. I don't know. Yeah, listen, there's fringe on both sides, 100%. But I don't know. I saw Scalise, who's a friend, get shot. And I saw my father get shot. And then I saw him almost get killed again. And then you saw what they tried to do to Kavanaugh when there's a madman with a rifle outside his home. And then you saw what they just did to Charlie Kirk. I mean, isn't that really interesting that the bullets in this country are only flying in one way? And, the party that preaches tolerance in this nation is actually the least tolerant people that you've ever met in your entire life. But that's why all of a sudden you've got this line and you've got so many people tacking over to the side. And I know you question what I said before about, I think there's a lot, I think there's a lot more good than bad, despite all the crap you see out there. Here, let me just give you a couple of metrics. We won the popular vote. We won every swing state. Every single state in our nation, all 50, swung far, far, far to the right. Counties like Miami-Dade that haven't been won in 37 years in this nation, we won by 11 points, right? We've won every single group. It didn't matter if it was African-American. It didn't matter if it was youth African-American. It didn't matter if it was female. Every, age group, Hispanic, Asian, youth folks, all across the nation, we picked up significant percentages of all those. And so here's what's happening. You had a pendulum that was way over here, and all of a sudden the pendulum's swinging way over here. And the Democratic Party, and they're losing their voice, they're losing the narrative. And frankly, right now, my father's doing such a great job that he's throwing so much steel in the air that they can't catch it. They can't even counter narrative it, right? But if they think that Charlie's death, somehow was going to erase a movement, it was not. In fact, it's only further ingrained that movement, not just here in the United States. When you look at the 1.4 million people in the UK that walked across London Bridge, you better believe that it didn't just affect us, and it didn't just affect the youth movement on a couple college campuses. It affected the entire country, and it affected the entire world.
It's so easy right now to be pessimistic. I think that was really great context, Eric, to remind us towards what I think is my more permanent bearing, which is optimism. But you're grounding it in realism and with that data and seeing that movement over time. And I appreciate that optimism. A little bit earlier, Eric, when you were talking about Charlie, it was touching on something that I've tried to highlight over the last couple of days. And that is what a unique character Charlie was in terms of not just his bravery and his eloquence and not just his intellect, but his skill as an entrepreneur, as an organizer, to build something from nothing. I once in a past life was a bit more of an entrepreneur than I am today, meaning at a much smaller scale from what you and your family have done or what Charlie did. I built businesses. And I remember sitting with a guy who I was raising money from saying, look, ultimately we bet on jockeys. We don't bet on horses, meaning we bet on the entrepreneur and the skills and the grit and the ambition of the entrepreneur, trusting that jockey will ride whatever horse across the finish line. I use that somewhat as a transition to talk about what you're doing now. The horse that you and your brother and Asher Ganu, your executive chairman and board member, have chosen to ride is the horse of Bitcoin. And today, American Bitcoin has hit the NASDAQ. I told you I have a great amount of ignorance. I just don't get it. And at some point, I could start to ask if I'm just stupid, Eric, or if everyone's pretending to get it. I know you're not pretending. You've gone all in from a real estate family to a crypto family. But tell me the significance of American Bitcoin and why you have decided to go all in on crypto.
So, Will, it all started with politics. I'm a hard asset guy. I've built skyscrapers all over the world. There's probably no family that's better at it than we are. Golf courses, commercial buildings, residential buildings, retail. We know that game very, very well. And one day in 2021, not too long after January 6th, I started getting letters from Capital One. They were the biggest one. We had over 300 bank accounts with them, from Chase, from Bank of America, from Wachovia, from you name it. It just about go down the list, First Republic. And I can name about 10 others saying, congratulations, all your accounts are gone. And they did it to so many of your listeners. I guarantee you have people nodding your head and listening to this in their car right now saying they did the exact same damn thing to me. And so all of a sudden I realized the power of cryptocurrency. I would have never believed in it. I would have never understood it. I would have said, listen, if I can't feel it, if I can't touch it, it's not for me. Until I realized that there was not a single thing done by JP Morgan or Capital One or any of these banks that can't be done better, faster, cheaper, more transparently on blockchain without some 24-year-old kid in some ivory tower deciding that they want to turn me off because I happen to wear a red hat that says Make America Great Again. And that's what they did. They turned off that spigot to businesses, to people, to families, to employers all over the country because somebody bought a Bible, or somebody liked Trump, or somebody stayed at a Trump hotel. They weaponized the hell out of the financial institute. And I realized, why does JP Morgan have to have 70-story skyscrapers all over? Why is it that a bank that I banked with for 25 years, if Laura and I want to go and we want to get a small mortgage for a house, because interest rates are 2%, under my father's last administration, why is it that I have to wait 120 days and go through a know your customer, to borrow against my own money that I have in the bank, well, why do they have that level of discretion? Chances are, if you're a Republican, they're going to say no at the end of it, right? And, why is it that sitting in this office, in this very seat, every day on a Friday, I'm trying to get a swift wire transfer out that if I don't get it out by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it's not going to get there until like Monday afternoon, right? Our financial system is broken. It's weaponized, it's antiquated, it's costly as hell, and it benefits the 0.0001% of people, including guys like me who've got a lot of zeros on the back of their family name and great companies, because we actually have leverage against these big banks, whereas the average person doesn't. And that's what got me into cryptocurrency. And that's when I realized that cryptocurrency can do everything of traditional banker. It can just do it 24 hours a day. It can do it cheaper. It can do it faster. It can do it more transparently. We'll go try and send money right now, from you to somebody over in, you pick the country, France. Like, good luck. What do? You go find a branch of some random French speaking bank. You have, FX currency conversion. By the time the money gets there, your money's going to be diluted by 30%. You're going to have everybody have their fingers in that money. It's going to take about a week, and chances are it's probably not going to end up at its intended recipient. That changes. That changes with Bitcoin, right? Which Bitcoin is the greatest store of value. It can be transferred 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, anywhere on Earth, instantaneously, almost free. It's appreciated somewhere between 50 and 70% every year, year over year. And what American Bitcoin is doing, and we just took it public on the NASDAQ this morning, Asher and I, we're mining Bitcoin at roughly 50 cent dollars. So, Bitcoin's trading at roughly $115,000 right now. We're mining it at roughly 50 cent. At the same time, we're accumulating Bitcoin on the balance sheet because, again, here's an asset that, grows, again, roughly 50 to 70% year over year. It's been the greatest performing asset of our generation. It's certainly been the greatest performing asset of the decade. And it's something that every company, every family, every major institution is buying and hoarding, all around the world. And I am all in. I am all in. I've never been more proud of this company. I am betting on strong horses. I think I'm a strong horse. I don't think there's a stronger horse than Asher, who's, on the screen with me right here. And we're building something that's truly, transformational. And we're doing it here in America. We're leading the crypto revolution here in the United States of America. And I could not be more proud of that.
Well, it's listed today on the NASDAQ, so if you hear that. Do we have Asher? By the way, I just heard a voice coming in. I think we were having some technological troubles bringing in Asher. Oh, we do.
Sure.
Asher, good to have you as well on the program. Glad you could join us. We were just talking to Eric about a host of things, including his belief in Bitcoin. I think what I'd love to do to bring you in here at the very end, Asher, is to provide for us, in the context of my own and maybe a good chunk of the audience's ignorance, what it is American Bitcoin brings uniquely here to the investor.
There is almost no asset in the world that is finite. Gold, uranium, if the economics are there, people will find ways to get more access to the underlying asset. The beauty around Bitcoin is there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin in the world. Much of that Bitcoin that's already lost. So that's key to why Bitcoin is an ultimate store of value. You're able to transfer. We transferred $200 million between wallets on a Tuesday at 10 p.m. for 68 cents. That's impossible to do in the current financial system. Why American Bitcoin is because when you hold dollars, why do people invest into the stock market? They trust in management teams to take those dollars, invest them appropriately, grow the value of those dollars. And so when you think about American Bitcoin, someone can own Bitcoin directly or own Bitcoin through an ETF, but you'll only ever get the exposure of that Bitcoin increasing and decreasing, and that's it. By investing into American Bitcoin, you allow us to take that Bitcoin, you allow us to build a business around it, where we're able to mine Bitcoin right now at a 50% discount. So instead of buying it at the market price, we're able to mine it at a 50% discount. Because of the volatility of Bitcoin, we're able to monetize that volatility and be able to issue convertible notes where we get 0% interest capital to invest into Bitcoin that's been growing at 70% CAGR over the last 10 years. And so, honestly, when we formed American Bitcoin, it was pretty simple. My parents immigrated to the US. They love America. And if you talk to them about crypto or Bitcoin, they wouldn't know where to start. And it's supposed to be a simple business built for Americans, creating the backbone of this great asset class in the United States and gives every person an ability to own a little bit of exposure on their balance sheet and their portfolio.
All right, that's the option today with American Bitcoin. Asher, would love to have you back anytime to have a little more in-depth conversation to try to plug the holes in my own ignorance when it comes to cryptocurrency. But we wish you the best of luck with American Bitcoin. Eric, it's always great to have you. You're welcome back anytime to talk about whatever you would like. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts today on Charlie Kirk.
Thanks so much, Will.
Eric Trump, Asher Ganu. Thank you, fellas.
Thanks, my friend.
All right. There they go. Today on the NASDAQ, American Bitcoin. Feels like an existential moment for the United States of America. How do we move forward? Are there any lessons from history about this moment? We're looking down the hallway. There's not a lot of light. We break that down with one of the smartest guys I know, Michael Malice, coming up on Will Kane Country. Over on YouTube, Michael Knight says, I like when Eric is on. He is always available and accessible to do questions and interviews. He could be the face after the party after Vance's 2 terms. Eric Trump, always appreciate having him here on Will Kane Country. As was mentioned previously, the quantity of ugliness is somewhat hard to ignore. Quote-unquote comedian Michelle Wolf, who I believe at one time at least had a platform on Comedy Central, had this to say about Charlie Kirk.
Right-wing commentator Charlie Kirk was shot in the neck talking about guns. He was very supportive of the Second Amendment and the right to own guns. He was also a bigot and a misogynist. Does that mean I think he should have been shot in the neck? No, of course not. I would much rather him live a very long life and grow old to watch his daughter become a successful, independent career woman who's maybe a little into witchcraft. Like think all the things he might have seen in his lifetime. You know, like a lesbian president, nationally recognized Muslim holidays, beautiful mixed race children, unisex urinals.
She wished for him a long life where her wish list for the future of America could be realized to the disappointment of Charlie Kirk. Joining me now is the author of several incredible books, Not Sick of Winning, The New Right, and The White Pill. Also the host of You're Welcome. Michael Malice joins us on Will Kane Country. What's up, Michael?
I agree with you. My books are not credible.
Incredible is not the same as not credible. You know, you and I were hanging out together yesterday on the Will Kane Show on Fox News Channel, and I do find you represent, I think, an interesting point of view where, on one hand, you told me, Will, I don't want unity with people who can't acknowledge the horrific nature of assassination, of murder. On the other, you also feel optimistic, a little bit like what I just heard from Eric Trump about the future of America.
Oh, very much so. I think what I'm delighted about is I think, first of all, there's a ceiling on how many people are going to have their eyes open ever, and that ceiling is quite low, and that's fine because they're not the ones making decisions in terms of the populace. But I think there is an increasing understanding that the time for dialogue is over. I don't think President Trump, in the first term when he ran in 2015, 2016, he said, I'm a deal maker. I'm going to sit down with Pelosi and cut these deals. He's not saying that anymore. He understands the reality of the situation. So I think, one of my points I say is the best argument against gun control is gun proliferation. These people aren't arguing in good faith. There's no point in sitting down having discussion because they're never going to say, oh, well, I lost that argument. You get to have your way. It's never a thing. Everything is always illegitimate that they're opposed to the point of advocating for violence for those who would pass laws or do things that they're duly elected to do. So I think this understanding that Ayn Rand had this great quote where she said, I'm not looking for honest disagreement. I'm looking for honest agreement. And I think there comes a time, and I think that time is long past, where this kind of bill bridging is of no utility because these people aren't negotiating good faith.
You had this great line yesterday off camera with me where you said, I think everybody pines for the 1980s. They pine for this moment when Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill would argue vigorously and then afterwards go hit the golf course. And now the fear is that the analogous Tip O'Neill would hit you over the head with his club.
That's right. Yeah, and it's scary, but I think people need to understand what they're up against. And I think something else we discussed is I think COVID was exposed a lot of the nature of who people are up, those who love freedom are up against. When you saw people advocating for kids being taken away from parents who didn't get their kids vaccinated, when you saw the Canadian truckers, I don't know if people realize this, when they had that convoy in Canada, the cops were saying we might take their children away from them. It's not safe for them over there, and the media cheered them on. So and the whole thing with giving kids sterilizing drugs and things of this nature, when you realize, and also normalizing predation upon children and just regarding it as just another lifestyle choice, when you realize what you're dealing with, these are things that you and I and everyone listening to this would have thought as unthinkable maybe 10, 11 years ago, and now it's in first grade. So I think there is an understanding of we've gone way too far, and talking isn't going to get us back.
I think you're a great student of history, Michael. My question is not what we're dealing with on two levels. One, the basic struggle of human nature.
Sure.
And then on the deeper level, that struggle within human nature is a struggle of good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm getting at is we're not actually in an aberration moment in history.
Right.
We are actually regressing to the norm. There have been moments in American history where we were very capable of transcending that tribal, inherently violent, zero-sum game fight for power. That's the story of man.
Yeah, that's right.
Until fairly recently.
That's right. Well, I think people need to remember that one of my favorite founding fathers, and I'm sure yours, Patrick Henry, in 1765, before America existed, stood in the Virginia House of Burgesses, pointed at King George and said, I would remind King George that Caesar had his Brutus, King Charles had his Cromwell, and everyone starts yelling treason, treason. And he'd do well to profit from their example. If this be treason, make the most of it. So he was arguing for King George to meet the guillotine in 1765. So there's been a long history of this sense, but it was always regarded toward political figures when there's no other option, like the last resort. It was never this idea of a Charlie Kirk, someone who's a political pundit. This is something that is unprecedented and new. No one was arguing for shooting H.L. Mencken or Walter Cronkite. And the cheering, I think the key to the cheering, as we discussed a little bit yesterday, isn't just that they're cheering, it's that it's not that people have these thoughts, that they're broadcasting them on TikTok, on social media, expecting and correctly expecting accolades for it instead of condemnation.
Let's be, you are a honest, self-aware truth teller. Let's be as charitable and as self-aware as possible. The gut instinct answer, it may be where we end up, but if a corollary of Charlie Kirk was assassinated on the left, Rachel Maddow, I'm just trying to think of...
Let's not even put a name, just somebody.
Okay.
Right.
I can honestly say, this is my belief, and I'm trying with all self-awareness. Yes, there would be some fringe elements. There would be. There always is. But I do not think you'd see this level of celebration of her or any left-wing commentator's death.
Well, I think I also would want to point out, if Officer Harris had won this election and this had happened to Charlie Kirk, we'd be seeing a crackdown on free speech the likes we've never seen in this country. She would be talking to Facebook, and Elon wouldn't take her calls, but TikTok and all these other outlets, and they'd be striking down so-called hate speech and violent speech, by which they mean anything that doesn't favor the administration. They were talking about this since Hillary ran in 2016. Tim Walz talked about this openly. There has been, in the same way that the Democrats wanted socialized healthcare since the days of Harry Truman, Bill Clinton tried to put it through, 40 years later. This has been for a couple of decades now, this idea. It started even Fox News. The fact that even Fox News exists was some kind of existential horror to the left. It's still regarded as some kind of correctly enormous threat to the left. So they have been waiting for an excuse to do what they're doing in Canada and doing in England. And I was delighted to hear what you said, and I agree with you entirely, that for Pam Bondi to be walking into this trap is completely un-American and deranged to me, because I think conservatives have learned that in the same way the Patriot Act was only against terrorists, and 5 minutes later, the definition of a terrorist is someone who owns a gun. Hate speech is very quickly going to be, as soon as there's a Democratic president, and there's going to be one, someone who that Democrat hates.
I have no idea what's going through the mind
Right?
of the Attorney General. I have no idea what's going through the mind of Pam Bondi. There is today, as many have pointed out, a legitimate investigation into the depths of this particular act of violence. Was it or was it not a singular, insane, hypnotized acculturated, insane individual, or was it part of a larger network? And that's worthy of real law enforcement investigation and potential charges. I also believe there are limits to the First Amendment. The Supreme Court has drawn that line at direct incitement to violence.
Correct.
And I think we should be vigilant.
Yes.
I think in this very moment, there is people beginning to push that boundary.
Yes.
I think that I have played a clip, and I will play more in the coming moments. For example, from YouTube streamer Destiny, which I can't say is certainly a direct incitement to violence, but we're getting very close to direct incitements of violence, which would require government action against certain speech. But hate speech is entirely un-American.
It doesn't exist. It's like this concept of gun violence, whereas in all these countries with gun laws, they're just stabbing each other and children are being assaulted by migrants. It's completely insane. It's completely un-American. And there's no precedent for it. Like there's precedent for obscenity laws. There's precedent for the sedition laws, which are obviously insane. But hate speech is an entirely university concept. And as people watching the show understand, the university is where the poisoning starts and where all the problems are coming from.
Let's stay on the note of information for just one moment. Look at this. This is really incredible, Michael. So this is polling that asks people, as far as know, is the person who shot Charlie Kirk. And then the polling asks people to respond. Is Charlie Kirk a Democrat? 21% said yes. A Republican, 24% said yes. Not sure, 40%. But it gets worse. Let me show you exactly how this breaks down. As far as you know, is the person who shot Charlie Kirk among Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. So is the person who shot Charlie Kirk a Democrat? Only 8% of Democrats believe that to be the case. Meanwhile, 40% of them think that he is a Republican. We've got a real problem with information.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the definition in their mind of a Republican is someone does something bad. So since he did something bad for some of them, therefore he's a Republican. It's also what we spoke about yesterday, the idea that anyone who is against you must be a Nazi. That Charlie, who is probably the most moderate of all these conservative pundits, was regarded as the most extreme because there's such a frenzy in this anti-Trump dementia that it's kind of like everyone becomes indistinguishable. And we saw it. I mean, we live in a country where Mitt Romney was considered, some kind of radical jihadist. So, and people say this with a straight face. So it's like we're talking about earlier, there's no room for discourse with this. This not a fact-based scenario.
Okay, I want to come back to there's no room for discourse. I do want to pick up on something you said a moment ago. This stands out in American history. While the eternal battle for human nature is good and evil on each inside one of us, and the great accomplishment of the American experiment is to push us beyond those tribal instincts, you still see this as a unique moment because H.L. Mencken wasn't the target for assassination.
Right.
Charlie Kirk is not William McKinley. Charlie Kirk is not a president wherein we have seen political figures be assassinated. Charlie Kirk is a commentator, sharing free speech. And we haven't seen that type of thing in the past. When you said that, it makes me sort of run through my Rolodex of history. I think you're much more well-versed than I am and able to pull off your fingertips examples of history. The best that I can come up with, just off the top of my head, would be the French Revolution, where private citizens were hauled before the guillotine.
Right.
The Jacobins wanted a purity of their civilization.
That's right.
But that was largely drawn on the lines of elites and the common man. The common man, and quite honestly, the elites who felt out of elite circles, driving the common man to find their fellow elites to place on the guillotine.
Right.
I just want to try to find this moment in history that we live in today in the past, because I think it tells us something about our future.
I agree with you. First of all, the only example I can think of is Larry Flint. So Larry Flint was shot. They didn't kill him, but he was like a public figure in kind of roughly analogous, but obviously he's a pornographer. So there's nothing that Charlie would be in favor of. I think what's different is because of social media, everyone, for better or worse, has a platform to make their voice heard. So back in the day, if you were a fan of William McKinley, getting assassinated in Buffalo, you would have thought, okay, I can't say this out loud. I don't have a mechanism. There's no newspaper's going to print my article, and I'm going to feel alone. But now, thanks to social media, if I'm that person who has that rabid view, very quickly I'm part of a network where it's like, no, you're the sane one. Everyone else is crazy, and there's no counterpoint to that. So it becomes this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think social media, for better or worse, and in this case, clearly worse, is an enormous mechanism toward radicalizing people in every direction.
What do you think we do about that? Because that is something I'm hearing, not offering this as a rebuttal or even a point of debate. That is something I'm hearing today actually from Democrats. I feel like I've heard I'll give you one example. That is Texas State Representative who's running for United States Senator James Tallarico, who's pointing at social media. Now, I think very little of Tallarico. That doesn't mean he's always going to be wrong.
Sure.
There could be a problem of what people are allowing to feed their mind through the mechanism of social media, but I'm not sure what we do about that.
Well, I think there's a vacuum. So for when you and I are growing up, there'd be like 4 or 5 news networks, and then you had Fox come along and CNN, and they were all basically some vague sense of left, but there was a consensus. It was a left of center consensus, but it was certainly within a range. Now, the corporate press has largely fallen away. Far fewer people regard them at ABC and NBC as reputable. I don't know if you saw this, but NBC News framed this assassination. They said Charlie Kirk, who was known for posing provocative and extreme remarks. I'm like, that's not what he was known for. He was known for fighting provocative and extreme remarks and trying to be conciliatory. So you're lying. So I think with that void, people looking for other sources for information. And unfortunately, it's very hard to distinguish in that space between, okay, who's talking sense and who is playing to your worst urges.
Yeah, I've said this on several occasions. It really puts the burden on the consumer.
That's right.
It puts the burden on the consumer to find outlets that they find trustworthy.
Right.
And that's really hard. It's not an easy ask. But there is no big brother that's going to come along and point for you who should earn your trust and who is full of lies.
And I don't think people are looking for trustworthy. I think people are looking for those who would validate their presumptions. And that becomes very dangerous if it's like I have a visceral hatred of, let's suppose Charlie's somebody else. I can go to this website and I could curate my own news feed. So everything I hear is that Charlie's bad, Charlie's the devil, he had it coming, so on and so forth. So these are dangerous times we live in. I don't know how we claw our way back, and especially because I don't think anyone wants to go back. I don't think people want to have this big consensus culture anymore. You see it in Europe where all these countries, instead of having 2 main political parties, have like 9 in parliament. And it's just dissolving more and more. It's a very unprecedented time in that regard.
Man, I don't want to believe that you're true. I know that you're true, that it's a matter of market share. I know that there is a huge appetite for affirmation, for confirmation.
Right, yeah.
I know there's a massive appetite for that. I do find, I believe, an increasing appetite for purely authenticity. That authenticity won't always accompany truth, because if you're being authentic, you will sometimes get it wrong. But what they need to trust is that the person that they're listening to is someone who is authentically pursuing the truth. I find that to be an increasing appetite. I actually find the career of Joe Rogan to be the best example of that market.
Yeah, and this worked very well for Trump and Vance in 2024, because if you go on a podcast that's 3 hours long and there's no preconditions, you're really saying, all right, I'm going to be vulnerable, because you can't tap dance for 3 hours. You can get through a segment on a new show very quickly. They're going to commercial. But that's why Officer Harris was like, Rogan, come to me and you'll have 30 minutes and I'm going to tell you what you could talk about, because she's an empty suit. She would not be able to stand up that scrutiny for 3 hours. In fact, I recently got pitched, as a podcast host, the Democrats got the memo, and some organization is pitching different people to different, outlets. And they pitched me Jasmine Crockett, and I've never said yes faster. I doubt it's going to happen, but man, I would love to sit down with her for an hour.
Why do you keep calling her Officer Harris? Because of her role as Attorney General? Yeah, that was twice that he said it, and I was like, okay, I'm picking it up. I'm not, and I can do the math, but I've never heard it before, Officer Harris. Okay, Jasmine Crockett on your show.
I would love that. I would love nothing more. Wouldn't you not love that?
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
You just a moment ago said to me that you don't believe there is a future for this dialogue. And by the way, that's, again, I don't think you're necessarily wrong, but it's not a conclusion that I want.
Oh, sure.
I have not only enjoyed, but in many parts of my career, succeeded based upon the exchange of ideas.
Sure.
Debates on First Take on ESPN, debates on CNN. Even today on my shows, I like to welcome in those who have a disagreement with me. But you say you don't see the utility in that conversation.
Right.
Why?
Well, because I think Jasmine Crockett is like a WWE performer. She is not, ratchet. She's highly educated, comes from a bougie background. She's a performer. She does it very well. Her job is to get conservatives riled up, and she does this superb.
So to be clear, your goal and the reason you'd be excited I'm trying to tie together what you said earlier with this, is that you wouldn't be seeking honest disagreement.
Oh, no,
Jasmine
not at all.
Crockett.
I want to see the show. Yeah, she's puts on a great show. You guys talk about her all the time for good reason, right? There's few other people in the Democratic Party who know how to pull that Jerry Springer energy and get people all riled up at home. She's a heel. And Republicans have their own heels who get Democrats all riled up. Trump, I mean, the amount of outrage the Democrats get out of this man, this president had highly educated professional women walking around with pussies on their head and holding signs that says, "This pussy grabs back," something that makes no sense. And they did this proudly. He made them crazy. And I think Jasmine Crockett does that to some extent with conservatives. But again, I don't think with any politician, if I have them on my show, there's going to be any honest dialogue, because they are there to seek power, to present their point of view. I don't even know how much a position they are to speak truth, because at the end of the day, they're still beholden to the House majority or the Senate leadership. So they don't really have as much independence as they would like, except for a few of them. So I very rarely like talking to politicians.
So, but your point is that it would be not useful, but entertaining.
Correct. Yes.
So let me give you an example.
But can I ask a question for you? Like when you watch these House and Senate hearings and they have someone hauled up in front of the House or the Senate and the senators and the House members just yell at them, that's not a dialogue.
Totally.
It's a show. It's performative from both sides.
Let me ask you a question response. What do you think about the debates on the halls of Parliament? Do you find those more useful, or are they simply WWE?
I mean, they're clearly WWE. For people who don't know, the Prime Minister in the UK and members of the cabinet have to get in front of the floor of the House of Parliament, and the opposing parties stand up and just say the worst thing. They'll be like, "Well, since you're so terrible and everyone hates you, and your show is going to be canceled,
It literally
next week,
looks like WWE.
Yeah, can I get you a room that you might need and give you some food for your family next week?"
Right.
It's really that bad.
It's really entertaining.
Yes, it is.
So here's a okay, I'm going to give you this. So a few months ago, I had on this one that I referenced, James Tallarico. And it was a perfectly cordial conversation
Sure.
wherein we had a bit of debate. He immediately went to social media afterwards and lied about the nature of the conversation. He asked me a question and I bailed out. He said, "Producers are in my ear," and I refused to answer the question. You know, it went viral on the left, like Fox News runs away in the middle of an interview from. So, you know, and then I responded on social media about the nature of his lies. This guy, by the way, goes to seminary. So not only is he a politician, but a self-styled moralist as well. And so I think he's going to be back on my show this week
Oh, that's great.
in person. Is it great?
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking you. You know, because it is a debate for me. I will be sitting down with someone that I know to be inherently dishonest.
Right.
His track record has proven it.
Sure.
What do I get out of that conversation?
Vengeance? Closure? I mean, you're not like me. You're not bloodthirsty, right? But you are someone who's a family man. You have integrity. You have morals, right? So I think you would very clearly open with like, here's what you said. Here's the clip. Can you explain this discrepancy?
Right.
And also, if you felt I treated you unfairly, which is possible, why didn't you say something to me and give me an opportunity as men to make it right instead of going public and flipping out about it? Why are you assuming, casting the worst aspersions and not giving me the benefit of the doubt? Because I gave you the benefit of the doubt having my show and letting you speak.
Right.
That's the tack I would take.
Vengeance.
Yes.
Closure.
Yes. Am I wrong though?
No, it's going to happen.
Right.
I believe he'll be on the will.
And he's also going to go on social media and say,
Lie again.
Lie again.
Are you going to do this again?
Yeah. No, you know what you do? Before he leaves, you make sure the last question, my unsolicited advice to you, in your opinion, sir, have I done anything untoward to you in this interview or not let you speak? So if you have him on record saying that, it's really going to box him in what he says after the fact.
Explain to me how you view the future of America if there is no honest disagreement and there is no conversation to be had with the other side. What does that look like?
It looks like victory. Because there's
Victory.
I'll tell you in a second, there's many points of view that have been completely purged from American culture. No one is standing up and saying, you know what, let's bring slavery back, right? No one is saying that women should not be allowed to have jobs. No one is saying that there's certain things that are just like ridiculous. It's not going to happen, right? So I think there's large aspects of leftism which are long overdue to be destroyed. And I think there is an increasing appetite among right-thinking people that this has to happen, including many people on the left who are like, this is counterproductive for us. This is making us look like buffoons and widely hated, and it's not helping anyone in any way. So that is something I'm looking forward to enormously.
Okay.
So there could be just
I want you to describe the victory. What points of view from the left, it may be easier to say which ones survive, but what points of view should be retired in the same way we've retired a debate over slavery?
Oh boy. Oh, that's a great question, sir. I would say the biggest ones are the nature of government as a mechanism of solving social problems.
Oh, good luck. I mean, that victory is elusive.
Sure. They're all victories are elusive until they happen, then they're regarded as inevitable, right? If you look in the 80s, the Soviet Union's going to be around forever. Reagan, you're crazy. Thatcher, you're crazy. Gorbachev's not going to change anything. In 1991, oh, it was going to happen anyway. So this always ends up looking inevitable. That's a big one. A big one is this idea that this egalitarianism should be sought in every field is insane and not historically part of leftism. The idea that like if you have a career and it's not 50% males, 50% females, somehow it's wrong. This is something that can be discarded. So these are kind of low-hanging fruit. The idea that just because something should be free speech, that there's no downside to it, like pornography, that's something that Tipper Gore was fighting against, not that long ago. So these are things where I think this kind of valorization of sexuality without any concept of, there's a downside to this kind of stuff and kids should be aware of it. Not kids, but young people should be aware of it. These are all things that I think 5 minutes and open borders. Like Bernie Sanders was against it. Joe Biden was against it. This is something that leftists, if they had the opportunity, many of them would be happy to run on in order to get electoral victory like they did in the 90s.
Okay, so I heard what you had to say, and I thought of it essentially into three categories. The assumption moving forward in America that America is a nation state, and that nation state must be preserved. That ties into open borders.
That's right.
The foundation of America as rooted in traditional culture and values.
That's right.
That is a rejection of the sexual mores and the quite honestly, amoral behavior adopted over the past half a century as popularized in America, meaning literally weaving its way through every aspect of American popular culture.
And also claiming there's no downside. It's all upside. It's insane.
And then finally, the third category, which you kind of suggest maybe it's possible what victory would be described as going forward, is to stop looking for the government to solve all problems and to micromanage everything, including the percentage of the workforce assigned to any particular gender or race.
That's right.
Okay. If that were accomplished, if you and I were sitting here in 20 years, because to your point of the Soviet Union, sometimes it happens very quickly.
Okay.
If you looked back on this period of American history,
right,
how would it be described? What was it that was vanquished? What was it that was retired?
I think if that really were to happen, which I'm not holding my breath, and I know you aren't either, I think it would be regarded as Trump was the big transformative figure.
But
because
how would we describe that moment in American history? That moment of, we've had various moments. We've had literal communist movements in the United States. We have had libertine moments.
Sure.
We have had the era of slavery, to your point.
I can answer. I know. You know what we call it?
What do we call this moment we've been living?
You know what we call it? We call it the American moment. We call it the American moment. We call it the moment where America was almost on her knees, where violence was advocated freely, when people looked like they couldn't come together. And then you had this recoalescing of Americanism against forces that are inherently in some ways un-American.
Do you think it gets worse before it could possibly get better into that American moment?
There's no way it's not going to get worse, in my opinion, in the near term.
What does that look like?
I don't know, but it's you know how.
In other words, this violence, which seems to be a turning point, I'm not sure it's singular.
We are watching in real time Luigi Mangione being made into a leftist influencer. You saw Hassan Piker advocating for violence. There's no consequences. So until there's consequences, people and they have benefits, people are going to continue doing what they do. One of the difference between the right and the left is the right understands human beings respond to incentives, right? And if there's a big benefit and there's no cost to you, a lot of people are going to do it. So I'm concerned what's going to happen with Luigi. That's a big thing, I think, bubbling under. It was Walter Kern who had that first observation that they're turning him into like a modern day, like Che figure.
Yeah.
You see it right for our own eyes.
Yeah. I don't know that I'd ever placed that much significance on Luigi. I did see a clip of Bill Burr, the comedian, screaming "Free Luigi."
Was he really?
Yeah.
Well, he's gone
on the Late Show with Jimmy Kimmel.
Well, I wish I didn't know that. That's very unfortunate to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's also like, what did it accomplish? It's not like that CEO was like the lone wolf who's, evilly keeping benefits from people. If there's a systemic problem in the insurance industry, which we could have that argument, and I think it's a very fair one to have, this didn't resolve that problem. It didn't move that needle at all. So what is the utility, even in their terms?
I'm still just thinking about what are the consequences necessary for this to stop? And if it continues, what is that bottom before we make the turn into what you describe as victory?
I don't know. It's not going to be nice. And I don't think either of us want to see it, but then no one watching this wanted to see COVID happen. And I don't mean COVID the disease. I mean COVID the response. And that was, I think, looking back in 20 years, we're going to tell kids what it was like and they're not going to find it believable. You stood 6 feet apart for no reason? Why?
Does this administration have the power to impose consequences to avoid this thing bottoming it out further?
No, I don't think so, because I think it's bigger than the administration, and I think it comes culturally. And at the end of the day, you and I both want the federal government to be limited its powers. The federal government can't be an octopus with its tentacles and everything. So when you have 350 million people, and with 1% of them are violently crazy, which is not a high percentage, there's only so much you can do. And it falls on all of us to be responsible citizens and advocate for peace and truth and liberty.
Really good stuff as always. You can check him out on You're Welcome. That's his show. Newest book is The White Pill. Yes?
Yes.
Newest book is The White Pill. By the way, you're an optimist.
I'm hopeful, not optimistic. It's not the same.
Okay, and the reason I ask you that, The White Pill, there is another dark path as well.
Oh, yes.
And that dark path is the response of the right to a left that they feel like has been lost and resorted to violence. And that path to the right, we'll be real, does involve potential authoritarianism or just simply responsive violence.
We saw with the Patriot Act. And the Patriot Act, you imagine the Patriot Act on steroids. I mean, there's a lot of people who would want that right now. In the same way with COVID, people are like, I have nothing to hide. I have no problem giving up my liberties. There's plenty of people who are like, go read my emails, go read my social media posts. I have nothing to hide. Read everybody's. And then very quickly, what happens when a Hillary Clinton's president?
Right.
Is that really what you want?
Back to the hate speech thing.
Right, of course.
We're hearing from the Attorney General.
Like whatever gun you have, your opponent's going to have it at some point. So be really careful about it.
Right. All right. The White Pill, Not Sick of Winning, The New Right, and the show You're Welcome. Michael Malice, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Will.
So Michael talked about it'll take culture as well, or culture primarily, to set this thing back on the right path. Well, part of that is holding people accountable culturally, privately, for the things they're saying after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Why don't we run through some of the clips, some of the things that are being said, and ask, should this person lose their job? That's next on Will Kane Country. It is Will Kane Country, streaming live at the Will Kane Country YouTube channel, the Fox News Facebook page, Spotify, and Apple. We really do enjoy you being a part of our audience, and we would hope you'd be here every Monday through Thursday live at 12 o'clock Eastern Time. In order to do so, you just got to subscribe and hit like or bookmark over on YouTube. That way we show up in your feed. You wake up, it sets a reminder, hey, Will Kane has gone live. You jump in and you jump in to the comment section. Like, for example, Lawrence Smith, who says it's easy to forget that person Destiny. He doesn't deserve the attention everyone is giving him, a basement boy. Okay, Lawrence, I agree to some extent. This is like something that happened on the Will Kane show on Fox yesterday. So my plan, in which we executed, was I wanted to play what the left is saying that Charlie Kirk said. Two-a-days Dan, tinfoil Pat, you guys can jump into this conversation. But Dan, because of his proximity to certain viewpoints, was very well aware. They're playing a quote-unquote, and I think they're calling it, Charlie's greatest hits. And it's a series of cuts, a montage of him saying things like, if I get on a plane and the pilot's black, I have questions about that pilot's qualifications. What are some other ones, Dan? Like
the trans issue.
Wife, submit to your husband.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know what specifically on the trans issue, but right. Yeah. I mean, the long and short of it is racist, bigot, homophobe, transphobe.
About guns, too.
Here are some clips. Because he said that
that's the big one.
Some people dying in gun violence. Yeah, but why is that a big one? So the quote that they're using is he said something like, some people dying is the cost, essentially, of the Second Amendment, which is true. I mean, that is obviously not an endorsement of violence, and I don't even get how you make that leap, right? What more, I can say with 100% conviction, Charlie Kirk would not be, having narrowly escaped death today, advocating for limits to the Second Amendment. So I'm not sure what that gotcha is. I really don't, Dan. But that's pretty much the quote-unquote greatest hits, right?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay, so...
Yeah, there's just about that. Kind of like, and they still are playing all these clips. Like, I had to talk to some friends, be like, hey, I don't think you understand what you're doing right now.
Right. So the plan yesterday was to address that and to answer it in Charlie's own words. So to take these issues and sometimes these direct quotes and play them in their full context. For example, when he talked about Ketanji Brown Jackson or Michelle Obama or a pilot, he's talking about affirmative action. Now, make no mistake, he is insulting Ketanji Brown Jackson, the Supreme Court Justice, directly. But in terms of black women at large, he's talking about affirmative action and the price that you pay when you set quotas and say, for example, like Joe Biden did, my next Supreme Court Justice will be a woman and she will be black. Well, you've just set the parameters that mean that your highest priority is not merit. So Charlie's point, I worry about when I get on a plane, not feeling like the people that hired the pilot were prioritizing, above all, merit. It's completely uncontroversial. It's an opinion on affirmative action. He's right. And it's the same thing said by Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas from the bench of the Supreme Court. But I got this comment. Why do you play the clips from the left? You're just amplifying it. I got this one comment. And I addressed it on it. Because you have to address the lie to set the truth. Okay? And by the way, most people really appreciated what we did yesterday in playing Charlie in his own words and how he interacted with transgender debaters and so forth. So back to Lawrence, where I started this. Why is everyone giving attention to Destiny? He's just a basement boy. Well, my answer to that is twofold. One, Destiny has been on this program. I have invited Destiny. Patrick, is it just once or has he been here twice that I've invited Destiny in to have the debate, to have the conversation? How many times have we had Destiny?
He's only been on one time.
And I spent time with him here.
Okay.
He was a really nice guy. He was in the studio.
I mean, during that time, he seemed very receptive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only been really since, yeah.
So I don't know what he's doing. But the majority of what you get from Destiny, I think, maybe this is unfair because I don't consume the hours of his streams, right? But tonally, it's less like how he was when he was with us and more like this clip where he's talking about Charlie Kirk.
Out the crime statistics? Not exactly like...
You need conservatives to be afraid of getting killed when they go to events so that they look to their leadership to turn down the temperature. The issue is right now, they don't feel like there's any fear. Like, I don't know. It's like memes. It's just memes to everybody, I guess. I don't know, bro. I don't know. I don't care. I'm playing video games. Okay, I'm done today. I don't give a fuck.
By the way, he's like in his late 30s. You know, I'm going to bring you two back into this conversation for just a minute. There's this, and we're doing great. We are growing exponentially on YouTube. We're doing this thing, and, everybody wants to have a younger audience. Honestly, everybody wants to do what Charlie did, and that's to reach a younger audience. This is actually a great parallel. Why do you have to talk like that in pursuit of a younger audience? Like, I don't care, man. I'm going to play video games. Memed, murked, all this stuff. Like, you're 37, 38 years old. Like, grow up. Grow up. You're not 14. Why are you talking like a middle schooler? Like Charlie Kirk talked like an intellect and reached young people. I don't know, it's just kind of a small stylistic thing, but
it's comfortable
grow
for them.
The F up. It's not comfortable. It's performative. It's performative. It's perpetual adolescence. It's boyhood eternally. It's like, be a man. Grow up. Be like Charlie Kirk. You can actually get young people to listen to you. But, I mean, that's all beside the point because the real item there is conservatives need to be afraid for their lives. or what? We'll never turn down the temperature. Conservatives need to be afraid for their lives. Now, that is getting close. It's getting close. The limit on freedom of speech is direct incitement to violence. That's the 1969 Supreme Court case, Brandenburg. We do not have hate speech, as has now been articulated, and she might be backpedaling at this moment by Attorney General Pam Bondi. We do not have hate speech. The government should not be going after these individuals. Even Destiny, unless what we hear there is a direct incitement to violence. By the way, Destiny's getting close. I'm not sure it's direct, right? I'm not sure. It's pretty close. It's like it's worthy of a serious judge's consideration, you know, a serious prosecutor's consideration. Is that direct incitement to violence? But that is the standard in America, not people being ugly on social media. Now, I want everybody to understand free speech. There is free speech as a protection, as an American right, as enshrined by the First Amendment of the Constitution, which ensures you from protection against the government and government influence and force, for example, through social media, which we saw under the Biden administration, from coming after and silencing your speech. And then there is the culture of free speech, which I also believe in, which requires individuals in America to uphold a commitment to hearing all ideas, not just to honor the speaker, but for the benefit of the listener. It's valuable for you to hear Destiny. Why? Because you need to know. It's valuable to know what the left is saying about Charlie Kirk. Why? Because to be informed, to be correct, and to be truthful, and to be right, you have to know what's being said. So I believe in both a culture and a right of free speech. Now, that being said, there are people losing their jobs all over the country right now. And the left is saying this is the right, hypocritically embracing cancel culture. And to that I say, no. I'm with Michael Malice. These people privately can and should lose their jobs, and it represents no threat to our culture of free speech. You see, there's a difference between what happened in 2020 and what's happening right now in 2025. In 2020, people, like, I'll give you an example. Grant Napier. Grant Napier was the play-by-play announcer for the Sacramento Kings. Play-by-play, Sacramento Kings. Decades. You know, De'Aaron Fox brings the ball up the court, passes it to Harrison Barnes. Harrison Barnes for three. Kings lose. That's Grant Napier. He was fired in 2020 in the months after George Floyd's death. Why? Because he tweeted, "All lives matter." Innocuous, true, but at that time, it's a rejection that black lives actually matter. That's the argument they tried to make. You guys remember this? If you say all lives matter, you're essentially saying black lives don't matter. That's what they did.
So ridiculous.
That was a rhetorical trick. He simply affirmed that all human beings' lives matter. Grant Napier lost his job. Lost his job from the Sacramento Kings. There's a difference between that and someone celebrating assassination and murder. And if you're an employer today and you look up and you see your auto parts salesman, your electrician, your school's teacher of your children, which uses your taxpayer dollars, saying those types of things, don't you have a right to go, I'm not sure I want that representing my company. I'm not sure I want to patronize that company. I'm not sure I want to send my taxpayer dollars to that particular school. The answer is, hell yes, you do. And that's not ruining anyone's sense or culture of free speech. That is displaying common human decency. Human decency is what has been lacking from the soul and the career of Don Lemon for a long time. Here's Don Lemon after the wake of the murder of Charlie Kirk.
The thing that is so obvious about it, and I think that's so disgusting, is that you don't really care. You don't really care about Charlie Kirk. What you care is that this is a moment that you can use for clicks, to boost your podcast or your streaming show or your radio show or your television show or your news show or your MAGA bona fides with the MAGA group or your political stripes, that you can improve it, or you can have a moment where you're crying in front of the cameras. You gather all the reporters at the Capitol and you go, and it's your fault, and it's your fault, and it's the left and whatever.
Man, part of me wants to just get so mad. Like, we don't care. For many of us, he was our friend. For most of us listening, somehow in some way, everyone had an emotional connection to him or this moment. Patrick's been texting me. I don't know, Patrick, you ever interacted with Charlie. I don't know if you ever did in trying to book for this show. You felt it. I mean, I have buddies texting me that never met him. I meet young people who only experience him through their scroll on their phone. All impacted. And this is such projection. This is Don Lemon, the man who went on the street immediately, man on the street, to ask people what they felt about the murder of Charlie Kirk. I mean, for clicks. For clicks. God, he's repulsive. That's why he doesn't have a job, by the way, because ultimately he's so repulsive that that pimple's gonna pop somewhere. And then finally, because we've talked about this culture that has been bubbling and growing and festering for some time, I don't think we're going to allow this to happen. We're not going to allow people to get away with this. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says, hey, man, I've never called Republicans Nazis.
No, I have not. That is completely false. I have never called Republicans Nazis. Well, that's what they'd like to say. They're lying. They're lying. Well, that's not what I called them.
Oh, really? They're lying? Or you're lying, Governor Pritzker? Dan, it'd be awesome if you had some tape of Pritzker.
The dangers that we saw in Nazi Germany are the dangers that we need to react to now. It's a 5-alarm fire, everyone. It's time to step out of your comfort zone. And
is that it, Dan? Because there was multiple. That's the one we've got. Okay.
I know there's another one with even more, that's my mistake.
Come on, tinfoil. Damn it.
On
top of that, he's got like 6. On top of that, he's got like 6 posts on Instagram, on X, doing the exact same thing. I mean, like, you literally have like a dozen examples of him. I'm not mad at you. I'm talking to the audience. You have like a dozen examples of him doing it and calling them liars for saying he didn't do it. Here, how about this? It's just part, with Pritzker, of a larger thing that they're all doing. As recently as last week, I think the day before Charlie's murder, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut was saying, this is war and we must win the war by any means necessary. By the way, when people say by any means necessary, does everyone know what they mean? I mean, that's Malcolm X. That is like, it means including violence. That's what by any means necessary means. Okay? That was Murphy the day before. And he's not alone. Listen to all of these politicians before and after the murder of Charlie Kirk.
that man cannot see public office again. He is destructive to our democracy. And he has to be eliminated. And I hope these far right podcasters come to their senses and recognize that this is not war. We do not divide this entire country based on political ideology.
We are on the eve of an authoritarian administration. This is what 21st century fascism is starting to look like. I'm on the opposite side of that. I'm not with the Nazis. People can finger point all they want. Look at the record. Look at the actions of what we are doing. I don't think a single person who has dedicated their entire career to preventing gun safety legislation from getting passed in this House has any right to blame anybody else but themselves for what is happening.
It goes on to include Jasmine Crockett and Chris Murphy before and after, calling people Nazis, saying that Donald Trump must be eliminated. That was Congressman Dan Goldman. And then the second one was obviously AOC. And in the meantime, 2 days, you did pull up another, just one more from J.B. Pritzker.
Everything that he has done has been tearing down constitutional democracy. And that's what happened in Nazi Germany. It doesn't take very long to tear apart a constitutional republic. Indeed, the Nazis did it in 53 days.
Okay, so there's two more examples right there. Thank goodness for Dan. Yeah, pulling up on the spot. Good job.
I was about to end up on unemployment line there.
Did that for you, Pat.
Well, you're not going to end up on an unemployment line, not with us, but a lot of people should. A lot of people should for the stuff that they are saying. And that doesn't undermine our culture of free speech. That is requiring basic human decency and the tenets of a civilization. A civilization. And as Michael Malice said, we have to now fight for this civilization. We don't need the government doing it for us. We don't need the Attorney General Pam Bondi. But what's happening right now is exactly like Vice President J.D. Vance said. You see something? Hell, tell their employer. You're damn right. Tell their employer. This is not going to be tolerated anymore in society. No more. No calls to violence. No more hyperbolic name calling. No more in America. That's going to do it for us today here on Will Kane Country. We'll be back again tomorrow, same time, same place. Hit subscribe at the Will Kane Country YouTube channel, Spotify, or Apple. We'll see you next time.
Former Vice President Al Gore accused President Donald Trump in a new interview of launching a jihad against the renewable energy transition. In an interview with Axios, Gore said Trump was more loaded for bear this time around, in his opposition to clean energy compared to his first presidential term. He added that outside forces pushing back against Trump have also grown stronger, particularly outside the U.S. If you look at it on a global basis, we get a distortion field here in the U.S. now with Trump's jihad against the sustainability transition, Gore said. It's unclear when Gore made the remarks, but Axios published the comments on Wednesday. Gore's published use of the word jihad comes after Turning Point USA founder and conservative activist Charlie Kirk was assassinated last week. Kirk's death reignited conversations over the role political rhetoric plays in violence and motivated calls to turn the temperature down in politics by leaders like House Speaker Mike Johnson, R. Louisiana. Gore is no stranger to using controversial rhetoric against his political opponents. In April, he compared the Trump administration to Nazi Germany. I understand very well why it is wrong to compare Adolf Hitler's Third Reich to any other movement, Gore said. It was uniquely evil, full stop. I get it. But there are important lessons from the history of that emergent evil. Gore went on to cite a German philosopher's moral autopsy of Hitler's Third Reich following the end of World War II. Theodor Adorno described how the Nazis, and I quote again, attacked the very heart of the distinction between true and false, end quote. The Trump administration is insisting on trying to create their own preferred version of reality, Gore said. In 2022, Gore compared climate change deniers to law enforcement officers who failed to act during the mass school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. Climate deniers are really in some ways similar to all of those almost 400 law enforcement officers in Uvalde, Texas, who were waiting outside an unlocked door while the children were being massacred, Gore said. He added, and confronted with this global emergency, what we're doing with our inaction and failing to walk through the door and stop the killing is not typical of what we are capable of as human beings. We do have the solutions, and I think these extreme events that are getting steadily worse and more severe are really beginning to change minds.